you recently shared a story about your parents, and I loved that story and how they defied social norms,
They
gender
sure did.
stereotypes. Yeah. So can
Yeah.
you tell us a little bit about your childhood and the influence they've had on you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my parents were born, I guess my dad was born in 1929 and my mom in 1933. It was a very different world. And, both of them to very much working class families. My dad was born in the Depression, raised by his grandparents. It was not an easy life for either of them. And so they just both had something special in them. And so they decided that they wanted to go to university, which in 1950 was not something that a lot of a lot of working class kids did. So they both signed up to be in the Air Force as the way of being able to afford it. And so my mom was in the very first ever year of women officer trainees in the Air Force, which was just cool. I think there were 20 of them in total in the entire Canadian Air Force. So amazing. And that meant she could afford to go to university. And when she came out of university, she, came to Toronto and went to work and then just like demanded the positions she deserved as like the assistant manager in what was called personnel back then, which was unheard of. So she was like 28, 27 years old and in management in 1959, like crazy, 1960, crazy. But for her, it was just like, well, it's what I deserve. So I'll prove that I can do it better than any of them. And she got to go on business trips to New York, and she worked for Allstate Insurance. And so it was a big global company and got to travel and, live large back in those days. And so my dad, who was an accountant at a really prestigious accounting firm, used to brag that she made more money than he did. And he was cool with that, which again, for, a couple in the 50s and 60s, for him to be bragging about his wife making more money than him. And then when she decided that, after working for a decade, that she was going to stop to have a family and prioritize that, he was okay with giving up all that income and like, yep, absolutely. And so they just had this amazing partnership. And so my upbringing was, very, very privileged, very fortunate, very wonderful. And the one thing I tell people, because they find it different, is that, so many people in the 80s when I was growing up, you had your dinner table and everybody sat together at 6 o'clock and ate their dinner. And my parents never ate at a dinner table ever. My mom still doesn't eat it. She doesn't even have a dinner table in her house. And instead, we ate dinner in front of the television and we watched the news and we watched the McNeil-Lehrer Hour on PBS. And the deal was that if there was a word you didn't understand, there was a dictionary right there and you had to get up and, get the dictionary. If there was a place on the news that you didn't know, you got to the atlas or you got the encyclopedia. So it was a very unconventional way. We ate at the dinner table on Christmas or Thanksgiving. Like if there wasn't a turkey, we weren't at the table. And so that really, I think, is what's fed my brother turns out to be a professor and a cancer research scientist. He's not really a slouch. He's brilliant. And I think our curiosity so much was just came from our parents, who just came from really nothing and just set out to have a great life, but do interesting things and make contributions. And at 88, my mom still runs her little volunteer library in her community. Wow.
Very cool. She's in Toronto?
No, she's up in Muskoka. She lives on the lake. Wow. And the Walker's Point Community Library, which they have about 700 residents in the community in the winter and thousands on Lake Muskoka in the summer. And they just decided they needed a good little local library. And so they would create it, and they figured out how to get barcodes and have an online system so you could check if the books were in, and iPads to loan to seniors who were trapped in their houses in the winter. It's an amazing little enterprise.
She's not stopping, right?
All just on volunteer efforts of a half a dozen of them that are just amazing. So, yep, she's not stopping.
I love that you shared, your non-traditional upbringing, because you often hear, don't let kids stay in front of the TV or
we were constantly in front of the TV. Actually, this is a true story. This is such an embarrassing story, but we watched the news and we watched the PBS McNeil-Lehrer Hour, And I was in grade 3 when Egyptian Premier Anwar Sadat was assassinated. And he had been one of my heroes because of the peace process between Sadat and Menachem Begin in Israel. And I was in grade 3 and he was murdered. And I was crying at school and the teacher asked me like, what's wrong? I'm like, Anwar Sadat was assassinated. And she's like, whoa. So I have been a dork for my whole life, but once you're my age, it's like, yeah, it's cool. It's cool to care now. It was a little odd in grade 3, but and just the joy of learning things. Like my parents still just, until the day my dad died, he loved learning new things about anything. They just curiosity and just interest in the world, and I that's definitely baked into me.